I haven't seen that much criticism from most people of the Leinster final. It's been very much, the Dubs are back, Jacks are back. But like all the criticism that has been basically blocking up the newspapers and TV coverage over the last 3 days has been how crap the Ulster football final was. So you were there, eyewitness account. You're in Dealey Plaza for this. What goes on?
Well, even from the minute I arrived, like I've been told for years now that, you know, Clonus, Ulster final day, it's such an experience. So when I got this game, I was absolutely delighted, really looking forward to it. I arrive, you're sort of brought down back roads because of the traffic, but really well done. They sort of stopped the cars a good mile or two out, and they actually make you walk in. But obviously I got to go on in because I had equipment and that. So even just arriving, there was just, even that buzz was there. You know, the guards were all over Clonus. There was so many guards everywhere you turned. And then you get there, obviously the other final was on beforehand. So there's loads of buzz about the place and so many flags. Like, you know, years ago when you used to watch videos of like in Croke Park of the All-Ireland finals, was flags everywhere, and then everyone sort of stopped bringing the flags.
Yeah, I don't know why that happened.
I don't know why. I think
they stopped at the bamboo canes?
And people couldn't see and things like that. So I think that's why they stopped it. But it was like that. It was like years ago of every person seemed to have a flag, and the colour, and obviously had the band out beforehand. Just really good buzz. I was like, this is brilliant. Like, I was really enjoying it. And then the game itself, cagey enough start, both teams trying to figure each other out. Wasn't a score for about, I think it was 12 minutes into the game until we seen the first score. So obviously, not great. You know, you would have liked to have seen it more attacking, but you understand it's an Ulster final. That's what I was thinking. Like, anyway, you get it. And then I got a message, I think it was through the second half, from a few different people being like, oh, this is grim, isn't it? I was like, this is grim. I was like, what did he mean? And Malik O'Rourke was with me, and I turned to him and he said, I seen a few things on Twitter, all right, you know, people calling it out saying this is rubbish, what is this isn't football. And I sort of thought, I was like, geez, I don't feel that at all. I was just so enthralled. I was on the edge of my seat the whole time. I get it. I know people are listening now going, what, is she serious? But what I mean is, it's an Ulster final. It's tit for tat. It's one score here, there. You know, there's these players that are dying to win their first Ulster title for their county within Derry. So I get it. And I could feel that the whole way through. So I got the message and I was like, oh, and I text back to one going, geez, doesn't feel like that here. And they were like, oh, maybe it's the commentators actually that are swaying me. And I was like, what are they talking about? Because obviously I can't hear that while I'm on air too. So only afterwards did I hear and see all the commentary around it all. But for me, from start to finish, it was a brilliant experience. I hadn't actually experienced anything like that in, I don't know when I have, because even Croke Park for All Irelands, you're not allowed on the pitch. Obviously, you know, all of that is a bit more subdued because they have to control it, when it was chaos, obviously, on the pitch after, in a good way. You know, it was just brilliant scenes. So I loved it from start to finish, I have to say. What
happened at the end of the game? Like, you can't go down and interview the Derry players in the normal media area because they're not there. They're on the pitch for like an hour afterwards, probably.
They were still there when I was leaving. I've never seen that because I'm there till like the death, because you're doing interviews right till the end. And normally players are well gone and you're on your laptop on your own sending things back, but they were still there. Conor Glass was up in the stand when I was leaving, still signing autographs with kids, and he wasn't out of his gear, so I don't think he got inside. Like normally I would try run on the pitch afterwards, and you couldn't. They put up barricades all round, sort of say the entrance into the media area, so they put that all around and let the players sort of still be on the pitch, but then they obviously cornered off the fans. So there's a few fans allowed in there. So I was in that area and I seen Conor Glass straight after. So I ran over to him and interviewed him, and he was completely hoarse, and he, like, in the interview. So I was like, obviously you couldn't hear a thing from the crowd noise. He's like, couldn't hear a thing. I was shouting when you're calling for the ball, and so they were just ecstatic. And obviously you seen the scenes of everybody out on the pitch, the flags. It was amazing, and you could really see what it meant. And obviously for the Donegal people, Declan Bonner, look, I spoke to him after as well. Devastation, like, just really, really hurt. I think it was one of the toughest defeats.
Yeah, and I mean, I understand why, because it feels like they have the players to play a different game, and a game that might have been successful against that Derry team. So I'm sure they're second guessing themselves horribly.
Yeah, big time. I think as well, I couldn't understand why at the end of normal time, when it was level and they had the ball, I turned to Maliki and I was like, are they playing for extra time? Do they want extra time? Because I surely in my head said Derry or Donegal in extra time. I don't know why. I just maybe watching on the game, some of the lads, some were cramping. I was like, I think I would fancy Derry. Yeah, so I thought it was so strange that they didn't attack up the field at that point. You know, to try and create something. Maybe it feeds into that whole actually afraid to lose the ball here. You know, and it comes back to bite us, so we'll just hold the ball and go to extra time.
It does seem strange. So Michael says it's tradition, Ger. We don't have to change everything. Are you talking about the playing games in smaller venues? That it used to actually be tradition to play games around the country. There was home and away in most of these. We've only moved to Croke Park in the last 30 years for like Leinster quarterfinals, semi-finals, finals, All-Ireland quarterfinals. There's even been, I don't know if you remember when the American football made the game end up in Limerick, and it was sensational between Mayo and Kerry. It was like one of the best, one of the great GAA occasions. It was like, no, it has to be in Croke Park. It has to be in Croke Park. It has to be a half full Croke Park, no atmosphere, or an absolutely teeming Gaelic grounds, or Páirc Uí Chaoimh, or wherever.
Yeah. I think the best games that I've been to over the last year or two out covering games have definitely been in smaller venues, for sure.
Jared Lynch says, I think it's very different when you're at the game, understandable, and you can take in the atmosphere, etc. But as a spectacle, it was brutal. I mean, if you want to go and see a spectacle, go and see an art gallery. Like this, the Ulster title was on the line, and so Derry are doing what they need to do to win that game. And I don't know. I just think that if I do think that it depends on where you watched it. Certainly everybody who got in touch with us who were watching on the BBC were like, I understood exactly what both teams were trying to do, why it was happening, where over the course of the season they've developed and evolved all this, and somebody wasn't chirping in your ear going, this is shit. Because
that has an effect, and that it actually, makes you think a certain way. So it sways your sort of opinion, and it influences you to think a certain way, I would think. So watching that game, I probably would have came away thinking like that, but because I couldn't hear it, I didn't think like that,
Barry Kieran says, I was flicking between the BBC coverage and the RTE for the Ulster final. RTE analysts were slating the game, whereas the BBC pundits were calling the game gripping. Pundits control the narrative. I mean, I would hope that people can actually think for themselves. I thought that we were at a stage now where everybody is watching enough. Maybe there's just not enough league football on, because you don't see Derry, we didn't see Derry week in, week out in the league. And we were reading match reports and catching some highlights of them, but the exact same response was made to the Donegal team that came up, because people couldn't understand what they were doing. They didn't know what their style of play was, and so it was therefore sick, an abomination. And the same was said about Tyrone a decade before that. And Tyrone were actually one of the best teams ever to play Gaelic football. Like that Tyrone team that won 3 All-Irelands was festooned with brilliant athletes, ballers, and an amazing style that completely changed the game. But because Spillane called it puke football, and because Colin O'Rourke said he'd eat his hat if Dewar was ever, was it an All-Star or Man of the Match or Footballer of the Year or whatever, we were told, oh, this is terrible. You can't enjoy this. But actually it was sensational stuff. Like literally the evolution of the game before our eyes. And the two lads like, well, it was better in our day. And it really wasn't.
No.
Like, it really, really was not better in their day. So
no, and I think it's not always the way that Derry plays. Like, there was a lot more kick passing in the Derry-Monaghan game. So if that's what you're looking for. And they just changed up their style and their tactics because they wanted to win an Ulster title. So I don't think that's always the only way they play. They just change things up because, that's the style that they needed to in order to go out and beat.
Paul Quirk says, Ashling is right about being at the game. Let's get more fans to games by bringing ticket prices down, and you'll get great games in return. It would be interesting to see if it was like a fiver to go to the Leinster final. Would it be 80,000? Like, is that the way to try and get people back? I mean, obviously the way to get people back is to have a meaningful championship and throw out those ridiculous structures, but that's not going to happen. Jared Lynch says there should be a rule where no more than 10 from one team are allowed in their own half. The game is perfect. The game keeps getting screwed by people making stupid changes. And if you remember, if we think back to the All-Ireland finals where two teams were evenly matched, like Kerry Dublin or Kerry Mayo, those games are brilliant games. Again, those games are literally some of the best Gaelic football you've ever seen, because the strength and conditioning, the tactical and technical analysis and the planning that goes into it is far better than it has been ever before, because the backroom teams have got bigger. They've become conditioned from the time they're 15, 16. It's just, the sport is really good when you put two teams of equal standing against each other, and when somebody explains to you what's going on as opposed to telling you, oh, I don't understand this, so this is no good.
Yeah, absolutely. Even fitness levels, all of that is through the roof now, so they can go back and get forward. So if it is all men or women behind the ball, they're coming back and they're getting forward and attacking too. So we've seen that with Derry. The Dublin Meath women's rivalry has replaced the men's rivalry, and there ain't no men's rivalry coming back anytime soon. Well, we won't lose hope.
I think it's time for us to lose hope.
Have you lost hope with Kildare?
It's the hope that kills you.
I know, but you need it. You have to keep some hope. Thankfully, yes, we do. We have it now in the women's game. It's fascinating. Everybody's always talking about it. You know, if you meet anyone, you say you're from Meath, it's now, geez, the women's team, they're a brilliant team. I'm like, this is brilliant. You know, that's the first thing people say now. And they've changed the Leinster rivalry completely, because we didn't have that at all. But yeah, no, it is great to see. Obviously now they've met 3 times this year. Dublin have won twice, Meath won once. And with the game itself, at the weekend, it really came down to a few of the refereeing decisions. Like there was a sin bin for Moira O'Shaughnessy for Meath, for a foot block, which resulted in a penalty as well. So she was on the sideline and it was a penalty. They scored the penalty. And that really sort of changed the game. Now, Dublin, I still feel were better on the day and they deserved the win, to be honest. But that really did change the game. Few questions around, was it a foot block? It was sort of a low foot block, but I suppose that is still a foot block.
Talk yourself into it there.
Yeah, because if it was higher, everyone would have been like, oh yeah, grand. But because her foot was still planted on the ground, sort of, it's hard to describe. It absolutely was a foot block. But that did change the game. But there was a Vicky Wall yellow card as well, which didn't have an effect on the game as such because it was so late in the game. So she got a sin bin. But I thought it was... I'd actually be interested to hear what listeners think. Like, I couldn't really understand it. So Vicky's game is always about these power runs. So she bides her time. She waits till that ball comes by her and then she makes a run. They give it back to her and she goes at pace. And they obviously knew this and wanted to stop that. So people were looking out for Vicky to block her runs away from the ball. So the ball could be over the other side of the pitch and then Vicky's making her run this way. Say they run to her, block her run because they know what she's doing.
Yeah.
So that's what happened. They ran in front of her. They were trying it the whole game, really. They were trying to get in her head and they ran in front of her and she ran into them, knocked one of the girls over. I think it was Lindsay Davey. And then play went on and eventually then they called Vicky back and gave her a yellow card for that.
Right.
So I don't know, is that saying it's barging, but she didn't have the ball? Is it... I'm not fully sure, but...
The type of thing you want to get out in front of the referees for the next time and say, you keep an eye out on what the opposition are doing to us. They're blocking our runs and that's a third man tackle, and so therefore...
Yeah, it seemed like it was a call from the sideline, which it was very strange. I didn't agree with it now. It didn't have any impact on the game, though.
For ages now, we've heard that she's heading to Australia. It was confirmed this week, and what's happening there. Is there concern that she's going to like the lifestyle so much as a professional athlete and the seasons aren't as perfectly aligned next year and forevermore, and this might be it?
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously to see Vicky go, she's a massive loss to the Meath setup. I think a lot of their game works around Vicky. But for herself, to be able to go out and be a professional athlete, that's dream stuff. I don't think any of us would ever have thought that would have been possible in the women's game.
Yeah.
Only that the AFLW have given this opportunity. So for her, amazing. What an opportunity. It's great to see. But yeah, massive loss to Meath. Unless
she comes back and it's totally perfect. Maybe she's good enough where in Australia they're like, okay, we'll have you for half a season. That's fine.
Yeah, because she's going over after the All-Ireland campaign when a lot of the girls that are signed up to go this year aren't playing with their counties. So
they're already there, yeah.
Yeah, she's already in a bit of a unique situation in that regard. So she obviously has a little bit of power that way, that obviously she is that good, which she is. So she can sort of maybe have to make a few of those calls and say, look, I'm going to come over that bit later. I'm going to finish off with Meath. So hopefully that's the case. We obviously would love that in Meath.
Yeah.
You'd want her still there playing with the county, especially for championship anyways. But I think she's going to have a massive effect over there, just the type of game she plays.
The explosion in the league and the fact that there's ready-made athletes here means it looks like there's probably going to be a higher level of recruitment from the women's game than there is from the men's game, which is kind of natural because the league is a start-up league. So it'll be interesting to see how that all pans out. And like loads of them will do 2 or 3 years and come back as, you know, fully formed professional athletes with a completely different outlook, and then inject that back into the game. So it's a
Exactly.
it's a
Yeah,
carousel.
it's a positive thing.